Hello and welcome to Global Eye. I'm Parikshit Luthra and here's the top global story we are tracking this week. Separatist militants from the Baloch Liberation Army launched an attack on a passenger train carrying more than 400 people in Pakistan's Balochistan province earlier this week. Yes, we're getting you the pictures right now. Sibi district of Balochistan, that is the area where the hijacking took place. Now, Balochistan is a very geostrategically important area. It's rich in natural resources, natural gas as well, a point of interest for China and global powers, crucial for the China-Pakistan economic corridor. What happened in Sibi district of Balochistan has really shocked everyone, and all eyes are on Pakistan's response and the global response there as well. The rebel group bombed a section of the railway track and stormed the train, taking multiple hostages under their control. Reports also suggested that suicide bombers positioned themselves very close to some innocent hostages and also used them as human shields. Pakistan's military said that they rescued over 300 passengers over the course of 48 hours. However, at least 21 hostages were killed. The army also confirmed that 33 militants and 4 army personnel were also killed during the encounter. The Pakistan government has said that the siege has ended. However, a statement from the Baloch Liberation Army has denied this claim. So what did the Baloch Liberation Army want from the Pakistan government? The separatist militant group issued a 48-hour ultimatum stating that they would execute the hostages if Baloch political prisoners, activists abducted by the Pakistani military are not freed. They also warned that if military continued to intervene, then all hostages will be executed and the train will be completely destroyed. Pakistan Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif on Wednesday expressed grief and shock over the attack on Jaffar Express train, saying that such cowardly acts will not shake Pakistan's resolve for peace. China also condemned the hijacking and expressed readiness to strengthen counter-terrorism cooperation with Islamabad. To discuss this further and what this means for Pakistan and the region, we're now joined by Anju Gupta, a terrorism and strategic affairs expert and also former DGP of Uttar Pradesh. Anju Gupta has also immense experience in strategic affairs across India and the Middle East. Ms. Gupta, thank you very much for joining us on the program. Let me begin by asking you, Balochistan has been facing insurgency for several years now. How would you describe this train hijacking by Baloch Liberation Army in their quest for freedom from Pakistan?
Good evening, Parikshit. Thanks for having me on the show. For the past 2 years or more, the Baloch group, especially the BLA, has really upped the ante against Pakistani forces. They've been very frequently targeting their patrols, their bases and their facilities. The number of attacks have gone up and so has the lethality. They've been very big attacks, but this probably is the boldest. And why do they do so? They do so to erode the prestige and credibility of Pakistani forces, intelligence agencies, and the entire paramilitary setup that they have. And why do they do so? They do so because the Baloch people and the Baloch group see Pakistani forces as oppressors of Baloch population, and they blame them for thousands of forced disappearances of young men over the last 3-4 decades, and unjust cases that have been slapped against people who protest in Balochistan for anything, for socio-political freedom, for economic prosperity, and the ill treatment of women leaders who have now in the lead of Baloch movement in Balochistan for more than a year or so. Their ill treatment has become a very important factor, a very big factor for these Baloch groups to mount such attacks. Eyewitnesses account of what happened in the train is very interesting. They said that the militants segregated civilians from the security personnel by checking their eye cards. Pakistani media is reporting that militants not only killed many personnel, but they've also probably taken 20 hostages. These details will probably become clearer. It doesn't happen very easily in Pakistan because Pakistan forces generally like to kind of play down the losses and play up the heroic rescue operations. So I think we'll have to wait to understand the full extent of what has happened. But this was definitely one of the boldest attacks ever.
Right. The next question would be, what is the message that the Baloch Liberation Army is sending out and what could be the possible reason for this? One thing is discrimination. They wanted the release of prisoners as well. But is there a larger message?
the main message is to the security forces, agencies, and the paramilitary and the police, whom they see as oppressors. And they've already laid out these, conditions that you've kind of enumerated. There's an additional message here. What have they targeted? Like in Gwadar, like in other facilities that they have targeted, they have yet again targeted a strategic point, a strategic target, which is a passenger train. So what is the larger message here? The larger message here is that the groups are fully capable of targeting the ground lines of communication, which are part of CPEC. Now, CPEC is a flagship project for China in Pakistan. It is under the BRI. And this is how these groups are trying to exert pressure on China, to exert pressure on Pakistan to anyhow resolve the Balochistan issue for CPEC to succeed. Because CPEC cannot succeed if this is how it's going to happen, if this is how security will continue to remain disturbed, increasingly so in Balochistan. That's the larger message.
How do you see Pakistan's response and what the Pakistan government could do next?
Well, they have already started the blame game. They have blamed Afghanistan. They're saying that Baloch groups are based out of Afghanistan, and they say that kind of tracked a phone call from Afghan soil, to someone on the train, which Taliban has absolutely rejected, and asking for more proof. I wouldn't be surprised if they start blaming even India for this, directly or indirectly, or using some of their proxies. There'll also be blame games between the federal government and the state government now, because they have elected representative. And that is something which can actually take away any attempt to hard questions of Pakistani forces and their intelligence agencies. It's a failure, not only of intelligence, but also of fight them for 48 hours to rescue people. Pakistani forces and the machinery, I think they are going to likely to go after common Baloch people, especially their leaders, to instill fear, more fear, and also to take revenge for what has happened. I think that's how we are going to see, because that is how Pakistan has always behaved towards Balochistan.
Right. What are the lessons in all of this for Pakistan as well?
I think Pakistan has not understood, that counterinsurgency and counterterrorism need to be handled separately. These are different shades of violence and require different kind of interventions and attitude towards perpetrator of violence. Also, I think Pakistan as a state is not at all equipped, because given Pakistani Army's overarching role there, to correct historical wrongs, such as to account for thousands of disappearances, forced disappearances of young men, not only in Balochistan, but also in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. And these two provinces have become highly disturbed. One of the big factors has been of forced disappearances, because when people don't come back to their communities, the communities will continue to ask questions, and and they'll be quite vulnerable to any kind of an influence of terror groups or insurgents on them. That is what is happening in Pakistan.
Right. Ma'am, my final question would be, what about the larger ramifications for the region?
I would say since this is one of the boldest attacks, and they would definitely like to play a blame game, even by producing false evidence, which they've done in the past. So I think we are going to see more of that. And this is how the agencies and the security forces there also kind of avoid the talk about blame that they need to take for such a big failure. We could definitely see vendetta attacks through proxies and also through cross-border military operations. I wouldn't be surprised against Afghanistan and against India. I wouldn't be surprised. And unclaimed attacks, which are, proxy attacks through new proxies like ISIS-K and AQIS, which can't be, directly connected to the Pakistani security establishment. It's quite possible. Overall, it looks like that there'll be much more violence in Pakistan and in the region as a result of what has happened. Because there will be vendetta, there would be blame game, there will be effort to kind of sidestep the issue of inward looking. They would be looking outside as always. That's how I see it happening. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, ma'am, for joining us, giving us your view on what's happening in Balochistan and that hijacking that we saw. That was a big story. The world was watching very, very closely, and I'm sure China is watching it very closely as well. Thank you once again for being with us here on Global Eye. We're taking a short break, but coming up next, Elon Musk's Tesla unlikely to manufacture India as it hopes to enter the country with lower tariffs within 3 months. A special discussion with Daniel Ives of Wedbush Securities when we return.